mom's passed out on the couch again, sweat drenching her off-white shirt and her face looking sticky and warm. An old cup of tea starts to get moldy on the coffee table. The TV's on, playing nothing but commercials for things no one can afford, but everyone will get to continue the facade that England's depression is but a passing fad. Grabbing an empty trash bag, Beckett starts collecting the cans strewn around the floor. The sound of aluminium crushing not even slightly bothering his mother, who he looks at scornfully and scoffs. After leaving the bag beside her, he walks past her and slams the door to the single bedroom shut. He knows he's jolted his mom awake, and imagines what little drink was left in the can she held in her sleep spilling on her chest. She whispers under her breath, startled. He collapses on the mattress and lights up a cigarette, waiting. His mom walks in, disoriented and enraged by the closed window. She stands before him, arms crossed over her chest, pulling a green tartan shirt tightly against her small frame. Her loose jeans slump and hide whatever is left of her beneath them. She waits a few moments, waiting for him to acknowledge her presence. For fuck's sake, Beckett, open a damn window. I can't stand that fucking smell. It'll stick to everything, she said, her chipped nails struggling to slide the window open. Oh, God forbid this shithole smells like cigarettes instead of putrefied food and moldy tea. A real fucking improvement if you ask me. Maybe we can have the Queen over later. Sure she'll think it's grand, yeah? Beckett shouts back at her, gesturing toward the door. Sure, it's your fault for smoking indoors and leaving food out, she snaps back. What fucking food? There's nothing edible in this house. You know, you're an ungrateful little shit. Her words come out as a hiss. Oh, sorry. When's the last time you brought home any money? 'Cause last I checked, the only reason we still have this shithole and the moldy pizza is thanks to me. You know what? I don't have time for your shit. I'm going out. Don't know when I'll be back, she said, walking away, exasperated and disheveled. Shocker, he replied, rolling his eyes. Don't bother coming back if you like. Not like it'll make a difference, he whispered the last part, never really able to muster up the courage to say what he feels. As she slams the door, the floor shakes, and Beckett lights another cigarette and turns on the record player. The Sex Pistols blasting through the speakers as he picks up his guitar and tries to keep up with Steve Jones, a welcome distraction from his domestic life. He keeps at it until he hears his downstairs neighbor banging the floor with the tip of her broom and shouting at him to keep quiet before Billy Filth comes knocking at his door. He considers not stopping, knowing full well the cops won't come. Not because they don't want to, but because the same lady banging on his floor cooks meth and the cops would surely put a damper on the business. That said, her old man is a pretty nice fellow, and he feels bad for him. God forbid he has to hear his wife shouting for the rest of the night. He lays in bed for a while longer, staring at the ceiling. The room's a mess, just like the rest of the house. He wishes he could say it wasn't always like this, but it was pretty bad when his mom moved them in after his dad was gone. One bedroom for true grieving people wasn't the best choice, but they didn't have much of a choice at all. At the time, his mom was working odd jobs and all they qualified for was this place. At the start, she tried to make it nice, bought some cheap curtains that were more transparent than the cheap bed sheets, put some fresh fruit in the fridge that rotted before it was eaten, and bought Beckett a record player to fill the void inside them and the silence between them. But as time went on, a new grief settled on the flat, and the silence became longer, and the few conversations became shouting matches. She'd given him the room. She wanted him to have something all his own, so he at least had that over the other kids in school who had to share their rooms with 4 or 5 siblings. He used to take good care of it until he started noticing his things just disappeared. It started small, a forgotten toy or that nice shirt his nan had bought him 3 Christmases ago that was now too small for him anyway. Then he started working, yet he never found his money when he went searching for it. So he devised a plan. A controlled chaos only he understood to throw her off the scent of his money. It didn't work. Just made a bigger mess searching for it, and he was still broke. Now the room just stayed this way. Their clothes intermingled, no clarity on what was dirty and what was clean. Her things kept creeping into his bedroom until all he could call his was the bed, the record player, and his guitar, which he'd managed to buy by leaving part of his money with the downstairs neighbor for safekeeping. Yes, Mr. Meth. Bored, he makes his way to the living room, where he flicks on the TV for some background noise. The very powerful and the very stupid have one thing in common. They don't change their views to fit the facts. They change the facts to fit their views, which can be uncomfortable if you happen to be one of the facts that needs changing. Tom Baker's voice comes from the speakers and soon becomes nothing but background noise. Beckett chucks a stained copy of the Daily Mirror into the bin, the headline, the filth and the fury poking out as the paper gets soaked in grease and garbage juice. His mom loves the tabloids. Their articles, vapid and absurd enough to engross her. Truth be told, there were nothing but carefully curated fluff pieces of moral panic, created to keep them distracted and dumb. He props himself up to grab the copy of Shy Talk still in his back pocket. The cover has the classic ransom-style lettering popular with fanzines. Handwritten below the title was "Not suitable for adults," a silly enough line that made him chuckle, but that he didn't entirely disagree with. He flipped through the pages in search of the review written that week about the latest Buzzcock single. That Peach Shelley really was something else. His mind soon wanders from the page, distracted by the offensive stench in the air. He can't help but note the old stains and cigarette burns on the carpet that serve as ghosts of misfortune past. Once white curtains have browned and singed from their occasional contact with a poorly placed candle or poorly disposed of cigarette. Their presence feels redundant in a place where privacy is more of a quixotic concept than a fact. Nauseated by the smell coming from the sink beside him, he opens up the window in the kitchen and starts moving dishes over to the table to reveal the tap and a damp sponge that had been buried months ago. As he washes up, he opens up the little fridge in the corner and pulls out one of the few remaining cans of pineapple chunks, which he eats in an attempt to have some semblance of supper while humming along to the Pistols' Problems. While drying the dishes, he hears the jingle of keys. When the door finally gives way, it creaks and wobbles, threatening to fall at the gust of a heavy wind or a harsh push. His mom comes staggering in, grateful the door was unlocked so she didn't need to struggle with the lock in her drunken stupor. "Are you fucking kidding me?" Exasperation in his voice. "Don't start." The words come out in a near whisper as she steadies herself against the wall to pull her shoes off. "Don't start," she says. "You're drinking our money. Actually, should I say my money, since we have been eating fucking canned fruit for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. You are unbelievable." "Oh, quit your shouting. My head is killing me." "Yeah, I wonder why." Just as the words leave his mouth, his mom gets sick all over the floor. Reaching his breaking point, he drops the dish in his hands and chucks the empty pineapple can in the bin. As his mom slides down the wall, he rushes toward the bedroom. He grabs a black backpack and starts grabbing clothes from the floor. He has no plan for where to go, but at the moment it doesn't matter. He just wants to be anywhere other than here. He can hear soft groans coming from the main room, but they do nothing but poison him more and more. He slings his guitar across his back and grabs a few records before heading back to the main room. "You know what? Fuck this and fuck you," he shouts at her. She looks on pathetically, her body slumped on the floor, saliva dribbling from her bottom lip, and her red hair in knots. "Beckett, come on, please don't leave me. I need your help," she says in a quiet tone as she runs the back of her hand against her runny nose. "Help yourself. I'm done," he says, slamming the door shut behind him. "Beck, no. You already killed one of your sons, you're not killing me too." The front door slams behind him, the numbers falling off, leaving an outline where they used to be. His breathing is heavy, and he balls his hands into fists to hide the fact they're shaking. His eyes dart side to side, mimicking the thoughts in his mind. What the fuck has he actually done? He feels a strong desire to run out of that building, a sickly feeling forming in the pit of his stomach. In the hall, the neighbors are sitting on a half wall smoking. They give him a quick look before carrying on with whatever they were on about. Yet he thinks they stare at him as he walks away. He hears shouting coming from another apartment down the hall as he turns toward the stairs and feels his body tense. He can't help but look back to check she's not following him. He can picture her, holding onto the walls to steady herself, shouting at him, one shoe in her hand. The flickering lights in the hall do nothing to assuage the anxiety mounting in him. He turns a corner and starts running down the stairs. The chains around his neck clatter and clink as his body bounces down each step. He stopped outside of the building's entrance, sitting on the pavement. He checks his bag to make sure his mom's not taken all his money again. He still has a few pounds left over from his last payslip, enough to get him something from the chipper at least. He turns his olive green eyes away from the street lamps that blind him. His trembling hand instinctively reaches for the cigarettes in his leather jacket pocket. Frustration and anger wash over him as he realizes he left them somewhere in the flat, but refuses to go back, unwilling to deal with his mother for another second. Going somewhere? A voice comes from behind him. Beckett jumps at the sound, despite the voice being deep and gravelly. His mind assumes the worst as his heart catches in his throat. He turns to see a hunched man in a dirty robe and slippers. It's the old man from downstairs. I don't know, he says after some hesitation. You got money? Concern crosses his face. He and Beckett stand at a distance. A plane could land between them safely, yet it's the closest he's felt to anyone in a while. Some, Beckett says, trying to sound more confident than he is. Well, if you need more. His hands fumble in his left pocket. Beckett interrupts him before he can finish. It'll be okay. Will you be back? Mr. Meth asks. I don't know. The man gives him an encouraging look, trying to hide his concern. Beckett responds with a weak smile. He haphazardly shoves everything back into his bag, worried his mom will come stumbling down the steps any minute now. He turns to give the council estate one last look. A dingy, cream-colored, unsafe, and unlivable but definitely affordable piece of shit passed off as housing. Thank fuck he's out of here. He starts walking toward the bus stop, grabbing the coins he kept in his pocket of his red tartan drainpipe jeans as bus fare. He heads for the town where he can go in search of food. As he steps off the bus, his creepers land on the pavement, graying from dirt, shit, and God knows what that's accumulated over the years. Crushed cans and greasy takeaway newspapers litter the floor, glued to the ground by the heavy rainfall from just a few hours ago. The cracks on the ground seem to be sprouting grass in their best attempt to reclaim what was taken from them long ago. As he walks on, he can't help but notice all the homeless people, huddled together in search of warmth and companionship. He tosses a few coins in a paper cup, willing to part with them, even if it costs him something else down the line. Few shops have their open sign turned toward the public. This was a dead street in a dead town full of graffitied brick buildings, with wooden planks bearing doors and windows, and yellow tape with signage reading "Condemned" or "Do Not Enter." The sky, not yet quite recovered from the earlier downpour, is gray and groggy as people walk under scaffolding for buildings that will be demolished before their inauguration. The streets at this hour are filled with a different crowd. Daylight is for the businessmen and the families. Nighttime is for the hopeless youth to put on a lively show to hide their disillusionment with their lives. While he still attracts some queer looks, most people just walk by. The closer he gets to town, the louder the city feels. Music comes from flats and houses accompanied by lively chatter and smoke. Down Tib Street, he carries on past the off-license. Through the huge glass windows, he can see underage kids try to bargain with the man behind the till for a naggin of vodka to liven up their night. Well, at least he imagines so. He was, after all, that 16-year-old a few years back. His eyes fall first on the crowds lining up to get into the pub, but his destination is just across the street from them. A bright blue building with a bold sign reading Kingfisher. The queue at the Chipper is about as long as you could expect it to be on a Friday night. He stands at the back of the line, overwhelmed by drunk teenagers laughing and shouting at each other, songs threatening to burst forth from their lips at any moment. They run recklessly to and from the pub across the street or simply shout at each other. Those who've yet to get in or are just getting out of the pub sit on the pavement, sharing chips and bottles of beer between friends. In front of him is a group of people around his age, old enough to be out of high school and already stuck in the queue at the dole. But tonight, they wear their best and celebrate or mourn their youth. Most of the girls wear colorful hot pants and bright tops. Meanwhile, the guys have on vibrant bell-bottoms with matching jackets and white turtlenecks underneath. One of the lads ahead of him turns, offering him a flask of something he is too tired, hungry, and cold to bother asking about. He takes a quick sip, letting the warm liquid rest in his mouth for a bit, then lets it burn his throat before settling warmly in his empty stomach. Cheers, he says, giving the flask back. What's the move tonight, babes? Asks the girl, stumbling toward him. Her ballerina wrap top is covered in sparkling white sequins that stand out against her lavender hot pants. Careful. Beckett reaches his arm out to steady her. Hey, I may be short, but your eyes are going a little too far south, she giggles. His face gets hot, and he wishes the ground would absolutely swallow him as she points this out. If there was one thing Beckett had little experience with, it was the opposite sex. It's funny how little time you have to be a normal fucking teenager when you have to make sure your mom makes it to the couch without cracking her skull open every night. He curses at himself, unable to find the right words, or any words for that matter, to defend himself. The best he can do is to redirect his eyes to her face, while making it painfully obvious he's doing his best to not look back down. He holds her up with his right arm while his left hand runs through his hair, cut to look like Joe Strummer's, from the black roots to the artificially red ends. She's truly a very pretty girl. Her hair was arranged into flowing blonde curls reminiscent of a picture of Jerry Hall he'd seen earlier that week. A picture that also made him blush, but at least then he was in the privacy of his own room. Her makeup was simple, a light gold eyeshadow surrounded with her nearly gray eyes, while a soft pink colored her lips. Her wide eyes were a safe place for Beckett to look at. Cat got your tongue? Because I can surely think of better uses for it than that. She was a shameless flirt, which would have been fantastic for anyone but Beckett, whose only reply was to flush as bright as his red hair. A part of him was banging against his skull, begging for him to kiss her, to say something. I'm just heading home. Even he was disappointed with his own reply. He feared he looked uninterested. "Aw, no, come on, you should come out with us, shouldn't he?" she says, turning to her friends for encouragement. Naturally, they all cheer in agreement. Beckett can't help but let out a smile before responding. "Not tonight." "You're no fun," she says, slightly hitting his arm and wearing a scowl on her face. She wobbles a bit, and Beckett's grip around her waist tightens as he pulls her closer to him. Their chests now making contact, her face turned upwards, now blocked the view Beckett was struggling to avoid. If it was any other night, his free hand tucks a piece of her hair behind her ear. He can feel himself blush even more as he does this, but at least he's doing something. He trails off, and she quickly takes this as her cue to speak. "Well, in a couple of hours it will be another night." She looks up at him with the look only girls give boys they fancy, and he felt a voice inside his head groan in frustration. He found her charming and sweet, and he truly wished it was any other night. The thought of stuffing himself into an overcrowded pub tonight was wearisome. That said, the thought of dancing with her excited him. She'd be a welcome distraction. He could feel the split between logic and emotions. One half begging him to not be a fucking idiot and stay with her. The other half still fleeing from his mom. "It won't be for me," he said, feeling a sense of guilt at letting her down. She had one of those faces you never wanted sadness to touch, and Beckett sensed she knew this as her bottom lip pouted at him. The part of his brain that hadn't stopped calling him an idiot since she called him out for looking down her shirt took over momentarily. He placed his finger under her chin, lifting her face to look at him as he turned his head, his lips dangerously close to her ear. "If only it were any other night," he whispered, and now it was her turn to blush. But when he pulled away, she simply flashed a dangerous, inviting smile before she stumbled back to her pack, disappointed but quickly distracted by her friends. His eyes stayed with her for a couple seconds, taking in her animated movements, wondering if she was talking about him in that sweet Donegal accent of hers. Wishing he had a cigarette just to help pass the time and warm him up, he asked the group if one of them happened to have something on them. The same girl pulls out a pack from her purse and, placing the cigarette between his lips, lights it for him. "Now you owe me a smoke and a night out," she shouts. Beckett knows this is probably a drunken thought she'll forget about in the morning, but he likes the idea of owing her, if anything, to have an excuse to see her again. She winks at him, and her friends pull her away, their food in hand. Finally inside, he's blinded by the white lights, aggressively contrasting with the darkness of the outside. From across the counter, a man shouts out at those waiting, expecting them to shout their orders back. Beckett quickly counts out his money and asks for nothing but chips. At this point, anything was better than canned fruit. As he puts down a bill and some coins, the woman at the till hands him the newspaper bundle of chips with a smile. He gives her a side smile and goes off, unable to stand his hunger any longer. He unwraps the bundle and starts picking at the salt and vinegar chips as his grumbling stomach growls for more. "Don't forget you owe me." He turns back to see the girl waving at him as she crossed the doors to the pub. He let himself smile, hoping she meant it.